lot of programming for families, a lot of programming for children and youth. We are community concerned. We have a lot of community groups that use our facilities. We try to be active in the community and support community programs.
Would you describe yourself as small, medium, large membership?
Well, in the realm of all churches considered, I would say that we're just medium. We have about 550 active members. In the Disciple Church, that's a fairly large congregation. So we are happy to be at that size, and it enables us to have a lot more types of programs to offer.
Well, located on 45th Street, that used to probably have a self-image of like a suburban or neighborhood church, but it probably sees itself more as a central area church now.
We definitely were a neighborhood church. Started in 1908 in the little community north of Austin at the time called Hyde Park. And yet now we are a metropolitan church. Most of our people do not live in the neighborhood around us, and we draw from as far as 15 or 20 miles away for our membership.
Well, now, in contrast to that, Sarah, give us just a thumbnail sketch, I'm sure, because it's named University Christian Church. That has been very central. It's located right there on the edge of the campus.
Yeah, it's right across from the horses, the fountain. And the church started from the Bible chair. Dr. Frank Jewett, for over 40 years, there was a Bible chair, and he taught courses in the Bible, and in the Bible, the literature, Bible is literature. And then in the 40s, he retired, and Paul Wasnick came. And Bill and I came to Austin in the last of 45, and in 47 we joined the University Christian Church that Paul Wasnick had started. He'd started the church, and it was started as a mission church.
But the Bible chair was in place
and
functioning and teaching students.
Yes, and
yeah.
We had the church first held their meetings in the Bible chair. And when we joined the church, there were 11 members. And so, of course, we will stay with that church we've seen it grow, and we've been involved with the Bible chair until just recently when the university decided not to have the Bible chairs anymore, involved with the university. And we've been very active with the university students. And they've added a lot to our denomination.
So the kinds of thing Bill was talking about, sensing oneself as a neighborhood church, that's probably never been a part of your heritage. It's been university-centered.
Yes, and then people do come from 15, 20 miles away to that church. It's not a neighborhood church, and it's one of our main problems have been parking. And now we do have parking place across the street. And we don't have that problem anymore, but with the university, as the university has grown, well, we have grown.
Well, the challenges for a church in a thriving metropolitan area, space, growth, we read of controversies about that. And in your neighborhood, it's all downtown, university area, it's a problem. How do you balance being faithful and carrying out the Great Commission and yet being a citizen in the community and balancing all of that? But Dwight, as we've talked about congregations and a feeling and how they have a self-image, you're not based in a congregation per se with being in a special appointment like that. Do you have a relationship or a home base in any of the Disciples congregations here in town?
Yes, I attend Pecan Springs Christian Church, located on Rocky Lane in East Austin, Northeast Austin. Pecan Springs is a smaller congregation that at one time was a neighborhood church, but as time has gone by, people have been moving out, and so we have people in all over the area. And as a campus minister, I do find myself being drawn to a local congregation, and part of my professional calling says to relate to a local congregation.
We've talked about 3 specific congregations. What are there, about 6 or 7, 8 Disciples congregation here in Austin?
There are about 9 here in Austin.
So you all are representative of a larger group of 9 here
Yes.
in Austin. Well, that's a little bit about what it looks like and feels like and sounds like here, but how did this Disciples Christian Church get started? Bill, what is a brief summary of how this all came about?
Now, that's a dangerous opening to give a minister, I have to tell you. Thomas and Alexander Campbell were in the Presbyterian Church in Scotland, and were sensing a need for a little more freedom within the church, freedom from some doctrine. They moved to the United States and found here a fertile ground for some of their ideas. There was a revival sweeping the frontier in about 1800. As the pioneers had moved west, the religions of the churches eventually began to follow them and caught up with them about 1800. In the midst of all this religious fervor in Kentucky, there was a man named Barton Stone, who also had some similar ideas, even though he was from a Baptist background, about freedom from various doctrines and the ability to feel united with other Christians just simply based upon being Christians. This resulted as the Campbells settled in Pennsylvania and began to evangelize through the frontier, and Stone's disciples began to go through the frontier and evangelize. The two groups got together. 1832, they shook hands and agreed to be a part of the same church, or movement, actually, as the way they saw it at the time.
Are you saying that was actually the start of the denomination?
was
Those
actually
two
the
gentlemen
beginning.
handshake?
It was a handshake. Alexander Campbell could not be present and sent a representative, and his representative shook hands with Barton Stone in 1832 at the Hill Street Christian Church in Lexington, Kentucky, and that began the denomination.
Well, I was interested by what you said earlier, that the strongest concentration of congregations is in the Southwest. Does that have anything to do with the roots, or is that probably the attractiveness of the Sun Belt, or what do you attribute the strength in the Southwest to the denomination?
That's a real good question, because actually the historical strength has been throughout Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, and Kentucky. That's our historical foundation place. And so probably what has happened more than anything else is just simply there's an energy about the Southwest Christian churches. The whole atmosphere of the state of Texas in terms of growth, I think, has led to this kind of opportunity for us. And so most of the churches in Texas are not old congregations. And we're finding a lot of new growth here.
Let me ask you another thing related to something you said earlier. You characterized the congregation where you're pastor as a fairly large congregation by the standards. Across the denomination, could you give, in all fairness, an average size? What do the statistics say the average denomination, the Disciples congregation is? Under 200, over 200?
More than half of our congregations are under 100.
Under 100.
We have a lot of very small congregations, and so you don't find a lot of huge churches amongst the disciples.
That may be part of their philosophy, wanting to break away from doctrinal and structural restrictions earlier. That might play a part in it. As we're talking about those formal things, the name is Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. Dwight, how did that particular rather long name come about? Do you know that?
Well, the name within the parenthesis, the name with the parenthesis is a major struggle for the Christian church. The northern unit were known as Christian churches, and they were really pushing and adhering to the doctrine of the Bible. Bible is the only creed. The followers of Stone in the South primarily were looking at themselves as disciples of Christ. And so as the conversation started about what shall we call ourselves, Christians, the people in the South said, well, you know, if we say Christians, are we giving the impression that we're the only Christians? And disciples really speak to who we are. So after a series of talking and sharing, the parenthetical name came into being, Christian Church Disciples of Christ, as a clear description as to who the groups were that were involved.
I would say that was a very good compromise, sounds like to me. Bill, didn't you have a symbol of the denomination that speaks very eloquently as an emblem?
This is the chalice that was adopted just a few years ago as our particular logo for our denomination, and it is a communion cup, and it has a cross in it, and that is the St. Andrew's cross, which is the national cross of Scotland, to show our roots in the Campbells coming from Scotland. The cup itself shows the centrality of communion, the Lord's Supper, to us. We celebrate communion each Sunday. All of our churches do. And we see it as the central focus of the whole worship experience.
So that would be very symbolic. Well, it sounds like you've been agreeing on a lot of things recently. Now, Sarah, let me ask you as a layperson, how would you just plain describe disciples? What are some distinguishing characteristics of the denomination?
Well, we don't have a creed that we recite. We don't have any the only thing to become a member of the church is that you believe in Jesus Christ. And we don't have a hierarchy. It's a congregational church. The congregations make their own decisions. And we use the Bible as the authority for our faith and practice, the way we try to live. And that is, to me, puts it in a nutshell.
Would either of you add anything to that as far as might be distinguishing to your denomination? I've always identified disciples as a very ecumenically minded group.
We're very interested in unity. This has been the polar star of our movement all the way through, and yet it's a unity built out of diversity. We see ourselves as a bridge church. All kinds of people come into our church, and we do very well together for the simple reason that we don't demand any adherence to a set doctrine or creed. We just unite together in our belief in Christ as Lord and Savior. And because of that, we have diversity, and yet it brings about a unity.
Well, now let's talk about that a little. Anything has to have some order, and you all are not rigidly structured, but you have some organization, I'm sure. Now, Sarah, if the pastor of your congregation retired, how would the congregation find itself another pastor?
Well, the chairman of the board would appoint a pastoral committee, and the committee meets. Well, sometimes they meet once a week, sometimes they meet.
Yeah, you need to condense that time frame.
Yeah.
It may go on a while.
And but they get resumes from our office in Lubbock and in Indianapolis, and they review these resumes, and then the ones that they think that they would be interested in, why people will go from the committee and hear them and meet them, and then they will come back and report. And then the Pastoral Relations Committee makes a recommendation, and the congregation votes on it.
So it is all up to the congregation, the search, the decision making, and then a final invitation. Is it called a call or invitation? It's a call system?
Yeah.
Does that sometimes mean that a congregation may be without a permanent pastor for a fairly long period of time?
Yes, well, we usually have, when that happens, you have an interim. That those are usually ministers, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but that are retired. And they have retired from, actual ministry, but they have not lost their ability to preach and ability to run a church, so they come and help out congregations until the congregation and the committee makes up their mind as to what church or what minister they would like to have.
Till all of the decision making has taken place. Well, now that's how it works from the congregational perspective. Dwight, as a clergyman, you were in a former campus ministry position. You
Right.
changed positions, and did that require the approval of any church authority? I mean, there's not a congregation to do that searching.
Right. As a campus minister, I am primarily on my own to make contact with various places looking for campus pastors, to write various letters, and to get support documents from our national church. Even though we are congregationally based as disciples, we do have national offices that relate and help us in maintaining connections across the country and across the board.
But from what you've said, they don't tell you what to do.
No, they do not tell us what to do. They give us information. They give us places that are looking for pastors of that nature, and then we can make the contact and then do the negotiation with the local people.
So you really are kind of a free agent if you decided a change was necessary or wanted to, like Bill said, Texas looked attractive. You can seek that, you can initiate.
Yes. In fact, on our dossier, we can request sections of the country to send our papers to when there are openings.
Well, obviously, the authority in the Disciples denomination is congregationally centered, and I think that always manifests itself probably the most clearly in the way a denomination chooses to ordain. Bill, how does that happen in the Disciples?
A person seeking ordination has to go to a seminary, an accredited seminary, and receive a degree. Near the end of their last year in seminary, they will meet with the Committee on Ministry for that region that they're in. The Committee on Ministry then has to give them approval, but they do have to have a local congregation sponsoring them, so that it is a dual effort on behalf of the local congregation and upon the regional manifestation of the church to try and give these people the proper credentials. Then they are ordained in the local church.
When you say, I'm thinking of something you said, the regional office of the church. You were recently elected to the presidency, the chairmanship of the Bluebonnet area Disciples. That's one of those regional offices you're referring to?
It is an area office underneath a regional office. And not all of our regions across the United States are divided into areas, but because our region, which includes Texas and New Mexico, is so large, we are divided into 8 areas. The Bluebonnet area is one of those.
Now, what is the Bluebonnet area?
There are about 62 congregations in a geographical area that runs from Austin south to Laredo, all the way from Corpus Christi to Del Rio, and we also have a relationship with some of the disciple churches that are in the lower Rio Grande Valley. And so it is a cooperative venture on part of all of those churches to do some ministry together and to help provide some services to the congregations.
So you have some networks in place, but it's not hierarchical. It's resourcing and helping local congregations rather than handing down things to be carried out.
We cooperate
Yeah.
on several different levels, and that is the basis of our whole denomination, as the churches cooperating with one another.
Well, I want us to move quickly to talk a little bit about how you all serve, not only in local churches, but beyond. I know that as a denomination, you have a unique ministry here in Austin, outreach to the mentally retarded. Sarah, tell us just a word about that, and I want to ask you a couple of questions too, Bill.
Well, it's called DOMI. It's the Disciples Outreach to the Mentally Ill, and what it is young people who do not have to be in the state hospital anymore. They could get out, but they do need supervision with their medication and some help. And so we have this house. It took quite a long time to get it together, and all the churches worked together to get this, and the Bluebonnet area helped. And we now have it's functioning, and we had our first graduating class. The young people come and stay, and they work out of the home, and then they stay there at night, and they have someone there that will counsel with them, and we'll check if they're on medication. We'll help them with their medication.
And that's one of those cooperating ventures that you talked about.
No church here could have done it completely by itself, because it was very
that's
involved.
often the case, is that together you can do things you could not do by yourself. We're rapidly running out of time, but I don't want us to leave until, Bill, you tell us a little bit about your involvement with Habitat. I know you helped get the affiliate started here in Austin, did you not?
Yes, I've been very interested in Habitat for Humanity, and we do have an Austin affiliate for that. This is a nonprofit organization that attempts to develop a partnership with the poor in order to help them have a home. We believe in private home ownership. What we do is that we will select a family, and we will work with that family side by side to build their home. They put in 300 hours of what we call sweat equity on their house, and then another 100 hours on the next house being built. When the house is finished, we sell it to that family at what it costs to build it, and we loan them the money to buy it at no interest. And what that does, it results in home mortgage payments for them of anywhere from $100 to $200 a month for their own home.
Well, that is a tremendous effort that deserves commendation, and we're absolutely out of time. I have to express my gratitude to each of you for taking time to be with us, and it's a pleasure to visit with these guests and learn more about this faith family. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll be back next week at the same time. Please join us then for another Austin Faith Dialogue program. Good day.
For more information about today's topic, call the Austin Area Conference of Churches at 472-7627.